Hello, my name is Michael Griffin for the Art of Outdoor Survival. I'm here to talk about fractal patterns that you would see in saltwater marshes to better understand how to fish a saltwater marsh area. Um, there's a lot of different things to think about, not just in the land, but you have to also start thinking about fractal patterns in the wind, fractal patterns also in the currents, fractal patterns also in um, the salinity of the water. That's very important, salinity of the water, salt in the water. There's different types of fish that like different types of salinity. Freshwater fish aren't going to like a lot of salt water, and deep saltwater fish aren't going to like a lot of fresh water. And there's fish that get caught in between. We call them brackish fish. And a lot of times mullet is considered a real brackish type of fish. It can be in fresh and it can be in salt water. But mullet can be found almost everywhere in the world. Um, but when you understand how marsh salinity thing works and the wind works, it kind of makes it's very easy to find fish. A lot of guys will go out there in the marsh and they'll get confused of where to go and how to find fish. But if you stick with these simple basic rules, you won't have any problems. And I kind of drew a map here. Bear with my artistic ability. This is a barrier island. There's a barrier island here. There's an inlet here, inlet down here. Now this could be a mile. This could be 50 miles, 25 miles, whatever. But up here you'll have rivers, freshwater rivers coming in to the backside of a bay, back behind the barrier island, the marsh. This could be a lagoon or something. And a lot of times you'll have bridges that go across that go to the island. You have bridges that are close to the inlets, bridges that are kind of far there in between. And what I mean by salinity, here you've got about 100% salinity, salt water up here. And what happens is, as it goes to the inlets, it starts mixing with the fresh water that comes from out of here. And on a normal day, when you get in here, it starts to become 70%. It goes 40%, 20%. And it will do the same thing on the other side. It will just create these circular rings of salt, of water. And when you get like somewhere in the middle, the tides are going in, and they can only go so far and bring so much salt water before the tides pull them back out. So this area caught in between won't have a lot of saltwater fish. They'll have freshwater fish, but they won't have saltwater fish. And and as the tides come in and out, different things are going to be happening with the fish. They're going to follow those tides because they like the salinity of the water. And also, they like the depth of the water. They don't want to be trapped up in here in shallow water, but they're a big fish. And what happens is, during rain, water will come down in here, and it starts spreading out fresh water. And then eventually, it'll just keep flooding this area with fresh water. The more it rains, the more fresh water will come into this lagoon area. And what will happen is when this starts mixing, the fish will have to, the saltwater fish that come in here, that might have been up here, are going to be pushed back to the back sides of these islands. Or they're going to be, if it rains so much, they'll come out and hang out at the ocean and hang out over here. But the reverse happens. When it doesn't rain up here, no fresh water is really coming in, what happens is the salt water starts to come up the river. And that's where you start to see the sharks, and you start seeing all the saltwater fish actually going up into the rivers up here. And that's the reason why they're doing it. But they can also have a dam release. If there's a dam up there and they're irrigating a water from a swamp or something, and they start flooding the water, it may not be raining, but the gates are being opened, so it also pushes the fish. So if you're in an area that has dams, you have to pay attention to the water outtake of the dam itself, because even though it may not be raining, the fish are going to still be affected by the fresh water that's coming in. So generally, if you're looking for freshwater fish, you want to be up here. But the more it rains, the more they can come out in this area. And it can get so much water that even gators can be found right outside the inlet, crocodiles, whatever. But once again, if it starts to go, the salinity starts to go back in because of the drought, or they're not draining the water, more saltwater fish can come up in these areas. And Another thing to take care of when you're out there and looking around is to think of the wind. If the wind is blowing this way, it's going to push all the food, all the phytoplankton um, um, and the bait fish, and it's going to push them up against this side of the shore. So even though it may be a drought, no water's coming in, the food source is being pushed by the wind up on the backside. Now the wind could be coming from this way. Now if the wind's coming this way, the fish are going to be, the plankton's going to go this way, and then the bait fish are going to follow, and then the bigger fish are going to follow it. So you have to keep the wind also in remembrance, along with the tides. Here you got tides coming in. There's going to be a natural current flow that flows. If you're fishing way over here, the current's not going to be as strong over here than it was over here. So what happens, these bigger fish, they come in here, and if you can get up under a bridge, which they call catwalks or hang off a bridge, you can literally see the current flowing faster in this area than compare like this area back over here. What happens is you'll have more fish running through here. So if you're standing on the bridge right here, you can catch more fish. But say you're on this bridge, the salt water never makes it to that bridge in high concentrations. So you might be fishing here all night and only catch fish like sea trout or redfish or snook every once in a while, which doesn't mind the low salinity as much as, say, this is mackerel coming in here. Mackerels like a lot of salt water. So you're going to find them coming through these currents but never really making it up here. Now another thing to keep in mind is you'll have a dugout channel for the boats to go through. We call it intercoastal waterway in the East Coast. And what they'll do is they'll spit the sand out here and create these spoil islands. And in between these spoil islands will be types of sand banks and stuff like that that flounder and stingrays like to hang out. So these are good spots for that kind of fishing. But for other types of fish, they're going to come in here and hang out in these channels and go up there because it's deeper. And they can get away from trouble if they have to. There's a lot of food going to be following it. So on the edges of these the banks where it drops deeper, a lot of fish, a lot of crabs and stuff are going to hang there. That's something to keep in mind. Also, when the fish come in, they're going to come up behind here and they're going to feed up in here in the mangroves and up in the salt marsh grass a lot of times. And there's these big holes on the back sides of these areas. And that gives the fish a place to feel safe at, these little holes. They will congregate. If they make it up here, they're going to congregate here before they go back down through the inlet. Another thing is these little wing dams. You have these little wing dams. Fish like to hang up in those little breaks and rest. A lot of times you'll find lobster in these kind of areas as well, and crabs, stone crabs and stuff. They'll hang up in these areas and give them a little rest before they go through the strong currents. Another thing to notice about fracture patterns is usually on the south side, you'll always have swampy, marshy kind of area. And as you move up, it gets in a hardwood thicket, a hammock is what they call it, down running in the center. In the front you'll have a sand dune. On the back you'll have either mangroves or salt grass or some kind of marsh grass or something. And as you go up here on the northern side, it'll be more wind struck, and you'll see these concentrated rings. If you look up at Cape Canaveral from space, you can see the rings being built because the sand is shifting up, and this island is slowly moving north. And but man is trying to stop that, and that's why you get a lot of erosion control problems. But the natural, it reduces sand from this area, drifts it over this side. So if you can kind of keep that, you're going to understand there's going to be a lot more food on this side than if it was on a sandy side. So if you want to fish, like on the inlet, and it has a muddy side, it's best to fish on that marshy side because there's more wildlife actually there for the food to feed on. There's more grass to feed on. And so there's being more concentration of fish there. But, you know, pretty much you want to know the fish that you're kind of fishing in a sense, and know what their salinity is. That's very important. And then pay attention to the wind. You got to pay attention to the tide, and you got to pay attention to the salt levels. Another thing is if you're camping, Don't camp over here if the wind is blowing across the ocean. Because what's going to end up happening in the summertime, you're going to be over here and there's going to be thousands and thousands of bugs and mosquitoes biting the hell out of you. Don't camp over here unless the wind is coming from this direction and it blows it off from you. But during the summertime, you want to be closer to the beach side because the wind will constantly bring in cool air. But in the wintertime, when there's not bugs and the wind's coming from this side, go to the other side of the island and it'll be warmer there. Vice versa, if it's coming this way, get on the mangrove side and you'll stay a lot warmer that way. But in the summertime, never be on this side if the wind is coming over the ocean, because what's going to end up happening, you're going to have the most hellish night you could ever imagine. So keep those in mind. You don't want to really be stuck in the hammocks as much because of the hammocks will trap in bugs as well. It gets pretty hot in a hammock, but a lot of wildlife are going to be in this area. If there's deer, pigs, or whatever, they're going to be hanging off in this area. A lot of times you'll find like little freshwater ponds, and that's a good place to hunt. It'd be like sitting in where the fresh water comes in, because those animals need fresh water, and they're naturally going to come to those pools to feed on. So if you can find the freshwater ponds, a lot of time you're going to see the bigger game going up into that area, if there is bigger game in that area. A lot of times you find a lot of land crabs. And when it's raining and letting a lot of water, the crabs come out of the ground and they roam around the ground because they can't be in the burrows or they'll drown to death. So that's a good time to hunt crabs is in a major rainstorm, because you'll have them by the thousands coming out. But be careful that if you live in the tropics and they're eating, can't pronounce it. It starts with an M, but it's an apple tree and it has latex in it. And if you ate it, it literally shuts your throat. It's that caustic. So if the crab is eating that, don't eat that crab, because that poison gets into that crab and you will ingest it. It will close your throat and you will die. But I hope that explains that in a saltwater environment. As long as you understand wind, salinity, fresh water, and what was the other one I was saying? And the tide, excuse me. Have a little brain fart there. As long as you understand that, you're better able to fish. Now, a good thing is when you have the tides with the full moons, there's going to be a stronger tide. It's going to be really high. It's going to go really low. And that's a good time to go. A lot of times you can go clamming, or you can go finding whelks and stuff like that, because the water will get so low on the beach side that you can actually go where these clams and pin shells and all that are hanging at, and it won't, you don't have to dive for them. You can actually just walk up to them and grab them, and that's a lot of food source there. I did this in Florida a lot, and it does work. I was shown a lot of stuff by my ex-girlfriend's dad, who was a commercial fisherman, and he kind of explained it, and plus I read a lot of biology books, so it all started to make a lot of sense how a salt marsh actually works. And you can take this pretty much anywhere in the world that has a lagoon, barrier island where there's an estuary in the back, or a bay, and as long as you understand this theory, you won't have trouble finding fish. They move to those things. Sunlight is another factor. If it's clear water, the fish are going to hang deep during the day. They don't like a lot of bright light. So you're going to have to start fishing a little bit more during the evening and nighttime. But if it's murky water and it's cloudy or something like that, the fish are going to come closer to the surface, so you can fish closer to the surface. You don't have to fish as deep like you would during a bright day. There's no rain, and so there's no the settlements settle down, and it's very clear. Fish don't like a lot of clear water in that sense. They can see trouble coming a mile away. So as long as you understand it, you won't have any trouble finding fish in a marshy estuary environment all over the world. Thank you very much. This is Michael Griffin.